On today's video, we're going to cover the 225 tight helix Swift spring. Been popular. We're going to compare it to some of our springs and see what the hype's all about. More on that when we get back. Welcome back. And on this video, we're going to cover the 225 tight helix Swift spring. Before we get started, let's like, share, subscribe to our channel. We're trying to hit that 4,000 number before September, so join in, help us grow our channel. Comment, give us growth ideas, give us video ideas, give us your opinion. Today, the 225 Swift spring. It's been quite a bit of hype or drama or talk or whatever you want to call it about this spring. It's different. It's different than what we've been seeing. So we're going to test it. We're going to test a normal Swift 13-inch 225. We're going to test a BSB 225, and we're going to test a BSB 250. So we'll take a look at these and how they rate it out, how they compare it against each other, and we'll just look at the facts. Let's take a look at the comparison between the physical makeup of the springs. So let's look at this chart. The first chart we'll show here is kind of the dynamics of the spring, the height, the wire thickness, the gap, the coil, the weight. So the Swift 225, free height at 13,075. The Swift standard 225 at 13,130. The BSB 225 at 12,975. And the BSB 250 at 12,980. So let's cover that first. Spring height is not always going to be 13 inches. It's not just going to be 9.5, 13 inches, 16 inches, right on the money. I will say there are some spring companies that do get it pretty close. Our spring tends to be a little shy, and here the Swiss spring was about right on the money. So it only affects you when you're doing the math, and we'll cover that more later, okay? Wire diameter, wire thickness. The 225 tight helix was a 0.615 wire diameter. The Swift 225 was 0.521. The BSB 225 was 0.521. And the BSB 250 is 0.539. Wire diameter changes a lot in the spring, and you can have a lot of wire diameter differences. Like we have stuff, 500, 550, 600, 650. The wire diameter doesn't change, but about 8 to 10 thousandths per spring. Okay. The gap is the spacing between the coils. And as you've seen, the 225 tight helix had a lot of coils, but the gap was 5.565. The Swift 225 was 2.660. The BSB 225-13 was 2.210. And the 250 was 2-inch 0.16 thousandths. The coils, number of coils, the tight helix one had 12 coils. The Swift 225-13, 5.2. The BSB, 5. And the BSB 250, 5.5. So both the 225 and the 250 on the BSB was 5.5. The weight, 13 pounds, 0.4, almost 13.5 pounds. The Swift 225, 5 pounds. The BSB 225, 5 pounds. And the BSB 250, 6 pounds. So let's talk a little bit about what makes one spring maybe better than the other, okay? So this is kind of not a controversy, but it's not really a topic because this is not how we were taught. Spring's heavy. This is not how we were taught about springs, okay? So like I said, the 13-inch is not really as important as we make it out to be. The spring height can be whatever the spring needs to be. And that's what the spring height's going to be, you know. So the spring height's determined through the grinding process. So it just is what it is. The only time it affects you is when you're in presetting with the tape measure. You may come up a little short on your load number, but that's not really a big deal because you're either going to come up short or you're going to come up heavy, regardless of how you set it. So whether you do it with the tape measure or you do it on a spring smasher, the spring smasher doesn't make it more accurate because if it's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter where you did it, it's still wrong. So um, the free height will vary. The the springs, you know, and the rate of the springs isn't isn't as critical as it used to be or as we thought it used to be. Things have changed in the spring manufacturing process. It has not gotten better; it's gotten worse. So things like preset are not being done. So spring height change is happening, and it is affecting the the outcome of the spring. So it's not as good as it used to be. So it's just something that is going on, and we just need to be aware of it. Um, so other things, you know, the rate 1+1 is not the best way to rate a spring, but it is the current way we do rate springs, and we do a 1+1 test because we rate every spring that we sell, whether it's ours or somebody else's. We rate it. We have them logged on the internet. We're not quite up to date, but we're pretty close. But we rate every spring. We do the easy ones on, and the light ones we do on a CNC rater. Then the other ones, the heavy ones, we do on a manual rater because we're not for sure how much load we can put on the CNC rater. So um, we do that, but we do a 1+1. Sometimes we do a load plus one. Sometimes they want to do a load plus load. Each spring, as it's manufactured, can have its own way of rating it. It's not all 1+1. In a 13-inch spring, 16-inch spring, like on ours, our tolerances say from block up 80% must be in rate. Well, the 2 inches that we race in a lot of times isn't in that, you know, is we're not checking it there. Our manufacturer's not checking it there. We are checking it there. So you might get a spring where you see online where it's a 250 and maybe it's 240. That used to be detrimental to people. Well, it's not that big a deal, really. And today it's really not that big a deal because we just go to a load. So, and it doesn't really tell you really what's going on with the spring. So when the spring is manufactured, there's a thing called spring life. And spring life it will dictate the outcome of the spring, whether the spring's going to be performance or the spring's going to be profit. So that's our two options. In the United States, most springs are built based on profitability. So they cut out processes like presetting, shot peening, tempering. These things take time. The spring physically has to be managed from station to station, so it creates time in the spring and money. So spring companies have figured out how to cut that out and increase the profits, and it just makes a worse product for you on the racetrack. So we're trying not to do that. We're trying to create a good spring with very good qualities. Um, and that happens in the design. When you design a spring, your spring life must be above 80% of its cycle life. And I feel like a lot of the springs we race on are not 80% of its cycle life. So we're way down on that. I do also believe, you know, regardless of what spring you're running, if you have a quality spring, that you need to probably trade it out every year. There's no reason for a $300 investment for you got a $35,000, $40,000 car and you're going to buck on a $80 spring or $100 spring, you know, 400, 300, $400 worth of springs, but you're going to go out and race on them because you think they're perfectly fine. And you got more laps on them than you know. And then you're going to go out and race on them like it's, like they're good. And then chase your car around like it's got a problem. And it does, it's in the springs. So if you want to run certain springs, then you need to understand those springs because you may be changing them out 4 or 5 times a year. Um, if you want a quality spring, then you need to understand what a quality, which ones are quality springs. So um, it's something that you know. I'm not going to sit here and bash one company versus another. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to teach you about this spring. But in order to be able to determine what a good spring is, it's nice to know what it takes to get to a good spring. So quality of wire. Right now, there's 8 mills in the world that are producing spring wire. There was 10. A couple of them quit. There's 8 mills. They all produce the same spec wire, but it ain't the same wire. So depending on whether you're buying it, you know, out of Asia or Taiwan or England or South America um, or Thailand, where you're buying this wire from, will determine the quality of the spring. And a certain call out from all 8 mills is not the same quality of wire. So you got to be pretty picky in your selection of wire. Fortunately for us, we have a outstanding spring manufacturer that stays on top of all that. He's very aware, very passionate, spent his whole life in building springs and quality of springs. And he's passionate about racing. So that helps us out a lot. So hats off to them guys. Spring life has to be up. That's number one priority. Preset has to happen. Shot peen has to happen. These things are not happening in certain springs. So if you're going to go out and you're going to look for a spring, these are the questions you need to ask. If the answers you get are bigger than life or hard to believe, and maybe that's an indicator that you're getting fed something. So be careful in the spring market today. There is a little bit of hype going on. A lot of spring companies aren't really out there. They're not really putting out anything. So our spring, we've always had a little bit of time keeping up on it because of what's happened in the market in the last couple of years, since COVID especially. And we started packaging springs together with shocks and spring packages, and we sold out very quickly. So we misjudged the turnaround time. It actually doubled or a little more. So we got ourselves in a little bit of pinch. So very good spring we have. There's very good springs being made. So with that little bit of spring history, let's take a look at how these springs performed. As you can see on this chart, that the springs weren't horribly different. Okay, so we'll look at the 12800. We'll start there. 13-inch spring. So if you look at some of our ratings, you'll see that we do a 12800 number, and that 12800 number is free height. So instead of making a physical measurement and saying it's 13090, we pull it down to 12800. We document that load. And so like here on the Swift, 37 pounds. On the Swift 225, 53 pounds. On the BSB 225, 48 pounds. On the BSB 250, 41 pounds. So you see just a little difference there in loads. Doesn't really mean anything. The first part of a spring is, let me show you. The first part of the spring here and here, or here and here, have to close. There's a dimension here that they call close on the first coil. That's where the spring stops and makes the same rate. So once the spring closes, it makes the same rate on out. Okay, so in the first inch, you may not get a full 225. Let's say it's a 225, it might have, first inch might have been 250. Sometimes people will do the 2 inch averaged out, okay, and typically it might come up a little low. But the first inch, on a 225, you might get a 219. Okay, and the second one you get, you clear the scale, you get a clean, because the spring stopped making rate, okay, or rate changing, kind of like a progressive spring. It's not changing rate, it's to a steady rate, okay? That's spring stop. So we'll go on with the chart, and we'll go down to 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, okay? And we'll go across the board. The Swift 225 at 1 inch, 207. The Swift 225 standard, 229. The BSB 225, 221. The BSB 250, 226. At 2 inches, the Swift Tight Helix, 422. The Swift 225, 459. The BSB 225, 439. And the BSB 250, 461. At 3 inches, the Swift Tight Helix, 638. The Swift 225, 687. The BSB 225, 656. And the 250, 699. At 4 inches, the Tight Helix 225 Swift, 858. The 225 Swift is 919. The 225 BSB is 874, and the BSB 250 is 947. At 5 inches, the 225 was 1,090 pounds. There are 225. Swift 225 was 1,133 pounds. The BSB was 225 was 1,097, and the 250 was 1199. The BSB 250 was 1199. So if you look at these, and I will see if I have it with me. If you look at these, you'll see a little discrepancy in spring rate, okay? And that discrepancy is, again, I don't know that it's that important, but if you 1 inch, the 225 Swift Tight Helix, it rated at 215. If you 1 inch, the 225 Swift 13, it was 230. The BSB 225 13 was 218, and the BSB 250 was 235. So that's the rate you get when you 1 inch, 1 inch. And if you look at the rate changes as they go down, all of them were very consistent. So there's a lot of comparables in these springs. They're not that much different. And if you notice, maybe the 250 was, R250 was a little different down through the profile compared to the others, okay? If you look at the BSB, the difference on that chart is between the BSB and the Swift Tight Helix. And where it shows a minus, it's because we're a little higher. Okay, the difference between the Swift Tight Helix and the BSB 225 is that Swift spring does get different once it gets close to touching springs. Okay, but you're still gapped out 125, 150 thousandths, but the spring is it feels as it's building rate faster, like it's going to coil line. That spring is going to coil line. And I think that two things that people like about it is, one, it does have a definition or a defined set point on the right rear. Right rear isn't going to go any further than that spring allows it. I'm not a big fan for that. I'd rather run a bump stop, or I'd rather run a spring that will just control the car. But that spring will bottom out, and for some people, that's great. It does build a little more rate as it gets down there and it gets closer. We didn't get all those numbers because they're going to change. It's pretty much a linear spring. So I don't think the rate is really the selling point for it. It's the number of coils. So when you put that spring on the floor and you pull it, it'll sit there and vibrate for a long time. And it's kind of like a car that has a low tire, and you wiggle the car, you can feel it wiggling around on the tire. Well, this is kind of what the spring's doing, but it's not really wiggling around on the chassis. It's creating feel for the driver. So because it's got, I don't know if it's more frequency or less frequency, but it's got a lot of vibration to it. It makes your shock more active, makes the shock have more feel. So boom, people like it. There's a lot of people out there that are very uncontrolled on the right rear shock valving. So that spring puts feel in the car, makes driver happy, so it's easier to sell. Okay, that to me is where the selling point in that is, not the advantage, the selling point. A spring isn't going to have a advantage until it makes performance. Okay, if a car feels better, definitely that can be a performance thing because people don't drive hard if they don't feel the car. Okay. So I'll post this. Well, let's take a little look here at the 230 250 spring compared to the tight helix, because that's the comparison that we're doing most of the time. As you see, as we come down through rate, the 230 250 spring builds better rate all the way down to its final set. So it will go way past 4 inches of travel or a 9 inch free height. They'll go way past that. That's just where we stop checking it. Okay. Because we're looking at somewhere around an inch, 750, 800 as a load number, and 2 inches down in the travel, 2.5 inches down in the travel for a stop number. So, a 2 inch and, maybe a 9 inch number. And that's about where we're looking for the spring to stop working. So that's kind of where we stop rating it. Like I said, as you see, and that spring does, it starts out lighter and it builds rate as you check it. We check these springs every 200 thousandths because that's what we do. Okay, that's how we check the 230, 250, and it's just how we check springs when we check them. Because if you 1 inch, you can look past rate variables as it's working. You don't want a lot of rate variables as the spring goes down. So all these springs that we tested here had very good rate variables. They tested very well. So I think they'll race very well. Again, spring life, quality of spring is the most important part. It's something you can't touch or measure. You can feel it in race car. When you put new springs in of any brand, you generally feel an performance improvement. And about everybody I've ever talked to will say, yes, that's true. That's spring life. And you may get used to it or it'll fade away. You need to understand that. If you're on some springs, you just got to change them out more. We got to get a better spring program going, people, because springs won't last forever. I've helped guys that 5 race and they put all 5 springs in brand new every 5 races. And it's a lot of springs, but the guy wanted lots and lots of races. It is a lot of springs, but he was very good. And that spring, he wanted to run that brand of spring, and they wanted him to run that brand of spring. So I'm sure they sponsored him, but he went through a lot of springs. And if you're happy doing that, then that's fine. That's good. If you're not happy or you think you can make an improvement, we need to get you into a better spring package. So there are some good springs out there still. And, as we get our stuff back in stock, then we'll be back on our stuff more. But springs are very important to the load of the car. But today we just wanted to kind of cover the 225 and why so much hype, why so much business about it, and at the end of the day, it's kind of just another spring, with a lot of coils in it. So anytime you add material length to the spring, it's bound to be a little better, okay? Because it's got more bounce in it, to say, or more frequency. So if you have questions, call the shop 620-326-3152. Check out the link below for the charts. They'll be on our website, BSB Go Fast, and in the blog. There'll be a link below in the description. Check them out. We'll add to that periodically. We add to the blogs. We update them. It's easier to do than sometimes updating a video. But we'll update them blogs, and they'll be in there. So if you want to print this out and study it a little at home. But most importantly, comment, because I really want to hear what you people have to say. Now, saying this last time video means only the special people are hearing this. So if you're one of the special people that have made it to the end of the video, and I know who a lot of you are, comment that you made it to the end of the video, okay? We'll play around with it a little in the future. Maybe do some stuff special for you guys. We appreciate what you guys do. We appreciate all of you that watch our videos. As always, go fast. Be careful. Be safe. Go fast. And God bless you.